And welcome back, Kevin. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Well, Rick, thanks for having me on again. I know that for viewers in the West, I'm probably almost the only source of real information about what's going on in Crimea.
Which is exactly why we need you more than ever right now. We are only seeing, sporadic reports. There is news out there, but you have to dig for it. It's not at the top of the headlines anymore. It's not like above the fold in the newspapers. It is it's buried now on page 2, 3, 4, and even further back and online. You have to like really search for it. It's not featured prominently. So I'm very grateful for the time you're spending with us today because I know that things have been escalating. There's been a lot of back and forth, and I can't really figure out where things are at. Can you just give us a broad overview, and then we can dig into some of the specifics? What's been happening in the last few days?
Well, since last time we talked, which was, only about 2 weeks ago, I think, um, we had pretty much nothing going on in Crimea, but Ukraine started striking Belgorod up in northern Russia, up by Moscow, and they bombed the city center of Belgorod and killed some civilians. So, in his New Year's speech, Putin said that he was going to increase strikes on Ukraine. And that's actually what I've been seeing going on here. And as I mentioned last time, we were expecting Ukraine was going to, save up a bunch of missiles and drones and make a strike on Crimea. And sure enough, yesterday, a fairly large attack occurred, and they also hit Belgorod again. So, but Russia has been striking back pretty much on a daily basis. They've been taking out a lot of the Ukrainian armed forces and most of their weapons manufacturing, storage facilities, and but they've taken a different approach to things. It used to be just like with Ukraine that only strikes at night because it's easier to get drones in undercover, harder to see with the anti-aircraft. Russia has been doing all of their strikes in the middle of the day, and they're doing it for two reasons. The first one is that they want to show the West and the rest of the world that Ukraine cannot defend against Russian missile attacks. So they strike in the middle of the day, the missiles hit their targets, air defense in Ukraine doesn't get them. And the second reason is because they're striking at weapons factories, UAV factories, variety of other, ATGMs, mortars. They're wanting to basically kill the brain. So they're getting the engineers who design the UAVs, the ATGMs, they're getting the people who build them. And, if you kill the brain, you kill the entire manufacturing.
Yeah, and these attacks have been among the most aggressive we've seen in quite some time. Do you have any idea what kind of numbers we're talking about here in terms of missiles used or drones?
I really don't. The reports I'm seeing is they are doing massive attacks on Ukraine. Let me pull it here. I've got something here. Last week, they had on one day 40 missiles arrived in Kiev in one attack, and less than half of them were shot down by anti-aircraft. And like I say, those attacks were all on assembly factories, military warehouses, and airfields. So they've taken out, a lot of their remaining aircraft and things like that. But 40 missiles in one day compared to, in multiple days compared to Ukraine. We had 10 missiles yesterday in Crimea, 10 in Belgorod.
Yeah. And has the Russian air defense system been working well? I'm getting the impression that they're shooting down just about everything Ukraine is sending over.
They are. And, they're making a big deal about the massive attack on, January 4th and 5th. But reality is during the past week, the Russian aircraft and air defense systems have shot down and destroyed one Su-27 aircraft of the Ukrainian armed forces over Crimea, a Mi-8 helicopter over Crimea. The numbers I've got from the Ministry of Defense says 8 Storm Shadow cruise missiles, but as of yesterday, they shot down another 10. So 18 Storm Shadow cruise missiles, 14 Tochka-U tactical missiles, 3 S-200 air defense systems that had been converted to fire at us, 107 HIMARS, Alder, and Vampire HIMARS rockets, 3 HARM anti-radar missiles, and 253 UAVs. That's just in Crimea. So, this is over 7 days.
That's substantial. That's
Yeah.
that's among that's the most we've seen in a while. Yeah.
Yeah. And like I say, the response from Russia is, much, much greater than what Ukraine is throwing at us, particularly after they hit civilians in Belgorod.
Yeah, I'm thinking the reason we're not hearing more about this here in the West is likely because the Ukrainian efforts have been largely fruitless.
Yes. Really, the biggest thing that they had was that strike on Belgorod where they killed some civilians. I don't recall the exact number, but 10 missiles yesterday into Crimea, and they weren't all shot down. Let's see. Well, let me just start at the beginning here. The missile attack started about 5:20 p.m. yesterday, but the Ukrainians took a different approach than they usually do on a Crimean strike. This time, they were better prepared. Their aviation moved to several bases to spread out where they were coming from, 3 different airfields. And about 4:20, there were 5 Su-24 bombers and 2 MiG-29 fighters that took off from 3 different air bases in Ukraine. And of course, they were detected. They launched the Storm Shadow cruise missiles, 10 of them, and several ADM-160 MALD decoys, which are decoy missiles that don't really blow up. They're just to try to confuse the air defenses, get us to shoot off air defense missiles at them. So those missile strikes started at about 5:20 p.m. here, and there were 10 missiles, like I say, that were taken down. They weren't all shot down. Some of them fell harmlessly, not at their targets. But at 10 p.m. last night, a Ukrainian patrol boat was heading towards Crimea, packed with explosive, and a Russian Federation ship destroyed that. And then there were a couple of missile attacks on Sevastopol, and 3 groups of drone attacks, really. And they started right around midnight. They were both air and sea drones. The first drones were shot down on approach to Saki, which is where one of our airfields is in Crimea. And that's where a majority of the drones were shot down. The next drone work began on Evpatoria, which is off the coast of north of Sevastopol. And out of 36 UAVs, 11 were shot down by air defense systems and guys with rifles, and the rest were taken down with electronic warfare. So, and the goal of these attacks is really to reveal where the air defense units are, the composition of the air defense units, and what actions they take during a raid in preparation for another attack. So we then had another drone attack that came from Odessa about 1 a.m. It was actually guided by an American Poseidon working off the coast of Romania. So it was directed by the good old US of A. And so what we had yesterday, we had air defenses going off in Sevastopol, Saki, Balaclava, which is near Sevastopol, a little closer to us, Kerch, which is where the bridge is, Yevpatoria, and Novorossiysk, which is actually on the other side of the bridge on mainland Russia. And they're guessing that was to see the air defenses there so that they can make an attack on the bridge. So we're expecting an attack on the bridge in the next couple of days.
So this is definitely escalation. And when last we spoke, your thoughts were that Ukraine was going to push forward, try to score some sort of a victory to show the White House that they can indeed make some progress and find justification, or help Biden find justification for additional funding.
Yeah, and
not working.
It's not working, and really, my thoughts is they're really looking for a PR win here. And that's all. It won't be any tactical advantage to them to hit the bridge or anywhere else in Crimea. It'll just be the PR of, hey, look what we've done.
Yeah, so today I was reading in Foreign Affairs at foreignaffairs.com, headline, "The war," it's just in front of me on my screen, "The war in Ukraine is not a stalemate. Last year's counteroffensive failed, but the West can prevent a Russian victory this year." That's the headline. And if you just read down, that seems to be a story that's trying to put a positive spin on something that really is an admission of failure, in my view.
Yeah, and we keep seeing reports out of the West here that it's a stalemate right now. But if you look at, any of the analysts, any of the guys who are actually on the ground there, Russia is making massive movements into Ukrainian territory. Last thing I saw this morning is they've actually advanced into and through 3 cities and are looking at taking a 4th city. So, there's advances being made by Russia. I actually commented on somebody's Medium article yesterday where they talked about how Putin was going to have to negotiate because Ukraine was holding them off, and he had an election coming up next, in March. And all I could comment to the guy, and the economy here is going down the drain. And all I could comment to the guy was with actual links to data that the economy here has actually grown, whereas the US economy has actually shrunk in the last year. And Putin, realistically, he will be president again. People will vote for him. He's got like an 86% approval rating. So, it's just all propaganda in the West trying to set up for getting a negotiation out of Putin so they can say, see, we pushed Putin so hard that he had to negotiate. And Putin made it very clear in a statement he made at a military hospital on the first of the year that he was increasing strikes on Ukraine, and he was not going to stop until he has denazified Ukraine, including the government. And he made another comment of the territories of Western Ukraine. He doesn't want all of Ukraine, but if they want to join back with Poland, Romania, Hungary, he's all for supporting that.
So what do you think the end of this might look like? It's we don't have, very accurate crystal balls, but what does Putin have to do to bring this thing to a conclusion, or what does Ukraine need to do to bring it to a conclusion? It seems to me Ukraine should be looking to get back to the bargaining table and negotiate something while they still have some leverage. But if that doesn't happen, what does Putin need to do? Does he need to push all the way through and take the whole country, and then, or what? I don't see a clear path to finishing this thing.
He doesn't want the whole country. The only thing he wants is what has historically been Russian territory. And he stated that just in the last couple of days again. So that will be Kharkiv to the north. It'll be the entire Donbass all the way up to the Dnieper River, and it will be down across Odessa on the south. And, with his support for Western Ukraine rejoining their historic territories, that'll leave Ukraine as a rump state. Now, the problem Ukraine has is Zelensky signed a law where they can't negotiate with as long as Putin is president. So it's going to take somebody like Zaluzny, the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, or Klitschko, the mayor of Kiev, overthrowing Zelensky, running him out of town, or the U.S. saying, hop on an airplane and, get over here to Miami to your condo or your villa in Italy, or, your villa in Israel or Sweden, all these places he bought with U.S. money. That's what it's going to take, is getting rid of him and getting people who are willing to sit down and say, okay, we will give you these territories if you quit shooting at us, and we will agree not to join NATO. Putin doesn't care if they join the European Union, but NATO is out of the question.
Yeah.
And of course, we've got some British colonel today spouting off that if Ukraine loses any more territory, NATO is going to have to get involved and go in and fight Russia. That's kind of the wet dream of, the British. They seem to have lost their minds as well.
Yeah, well, we hear some rhetoric like that here too, and I see John Kirby stand up at the news conferences every day at the White House and answer some question where he injects the ongoing request for more money and the need to continue to fund this thing. But I don't know if the public here has the stomach or any stamina left for it, especially heading into this election year. There's a lot of chaos over here. Can you give me some sense of what the public mood is like over in Russia? Here, the political scene is very polarized. The United States is almost, in the minds of some people, on the verge of a civil war. Is there anything like that going on in Russia? Or it seems to me things are more stable there.
Yeah, things are very stable here. We've heard reports that Putin will be president because he eliminates his opposition. Reality is Navalny was put in jail for breaking the law. Another candidate didn't fill out the forms properly to declare her candidacy, and so the election commission wouldn't take her. But there's actually 7 or 8 other candidates running against Putin. But he has so much support. All the new regions, Crimea, the only thing you see is elect Putin. This is what the people want. They love the man. They love what he does for the country. The economy is stable. Now, they have some propaganda as well. All governments do. They say, oh, we have very little inflation here. But, where we're seeing it is Irina went the other day to buy butter, and she used to get 500 grams for one price, and now she's getting 330 for that same price. So we do have some inflation here. Gas has gone up a little bit. We're still paying, 56 rubles a liter. So what, 5 times 3, 150. So about $1.25 for a gallon of gas. It's gone up. It's gone up about 8 cents in the last 2 years. And people are happy. We just go along with our lives. People don't worry as much about the war. They don't worry so much about the economy. People are working. Unemployment is extremely low here. And the government is putting money not only into the military, which is the part Western news outlets put out there. And they say the people are suffering because of it. But Putin, for the second year in a row, has increased payments to pensioners, disabled people, teachers, doctors. He raised the minimum wage. And he's now, for a woman who gives birth to 3 children, gives her a house to live in. No, it's not, a big fancy one, but it's enough to raise a family in. And they get a payment for every child that they give birth to. And he's made immigration easier for Westerners.
Are you seeing much immigration from the United States, Canada, North America, Western countries?
Yeah. Last report I saw, there were, it was like 3,000 some odd Westerners who immigrated to Russia in 2023. And, several thousand people who have come here on work permits to work in Russia because they need specialists like IT people, biologists, and sanctions have been great for this country. They're developing everything locally. The oligarchs, they're oligarchs. In the West, you call them, rich people. So, they're, because they don't want to invest outside of the country right now because the United States is threatening to take more money away from them. They're investing it in the country here.
Yeah, and those businesses like McDonald's and the big corporate chains, the retail outlets, even the credit card companies, bring us up to date on what's happening with all of those. Coca-Cola, all these brands, they've been rebranded in some cases, and the products are still the same or similar.
Yeah, Russia kind of did that well. These companies that wanted to pull out, they passed a law saying you can pull out, but you're required to sell it to a Russian investor at, I don't remember the exact percentage, but it was pennies on the dollar, and 50% of the sale price they have to give to the Russian government. Oh. So these guys lost a lot of money going out. These Russian businesses picked them up, rebranded them. I've been in, here in Crimea, what used to be a Kentucky Fried Chicken. It's now called Crimean Fried Chicken. And, the chicken's a little different. You go in and, you get chicken without bones in it. They take the breast and they, take it off the bone, and but it's still deep fried. You can still get spicy or regular. The colors are the same. The buckets are the same. But they're now selling things like herbal teas and fruit teas and things like that. So they've made some changes. McDonald's is now oh, I don't remember the name of it because we don't have them in Crimea, but something like Happy Burger or something. And you go in, you're in a McDonald's. It's run the same way. Coca-Cola, they left the Coca-Cola bottling plant here. They've renamed it to Dobre Cola. And I buy it. I buy their diet version, and it's Diet Coke. And their regular version is Coca-Cola. It's the same thing. Dannon yogurts here are now rebranded to another name. Exactly the same packaging, same colors, but because they own Activia, and now they call it here Activia.
I just looked up the McDonald's name, and it's Vikuzno Tochka. Is that right? That's what it says.
Yeah,
here.
In Russian, that's what it is. Yeah.
Some
of them.
Some of them.
But you've still got, you can still go to Moscow. You can still go to Burger King and Pizza Hut. You can still buy, your Swedish shoes here. Lots of brands that have either just renamed or they're selling and they're being quiet about it.
So tell me what's going on with the automotive industry there. First of all, what's happening with the brands? Are you still able to buy Fords and GMs and Teslas and I don't know what other brands are there? Volvos and Hondas and Toyotas and Russian brands, I guess, too.
Yeah, you can get those vehicles. They're much harder to get right now, and it's harder to get parts for them. Ford quit manufacturing in Belarus, because they got dragged into this as well. But like Mercedes, they still have a manufacturing plant in Moscow. They still shove Mercedes-Benzes off the line. Kia is very, very big here. But is what you've had go in, I haven't seen a new Toyota for a while. Like I say, you can find them. Fords are next to impossible to find. GMs are actually sold under a different brand name, and they're actually manufactured in Ukraine. So they may disappear, or they may be getting manufactured here as well. They're made out of seconds of Chevrolet parts. So Chevrolet sells them the seconds that they don't use on their own vehicles, and they make these vehicles out of them. And but what has taken over the market is Chinese cars. So we have Geely and Chery, and these used to be very cheap cars here. I could buy one for a million rubles, fully loaded, which is about $10,000. Now they're running 3-4 million rubles, 5 million rubles. So you're talking, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, and they're still cheap, cheaply made, I should say. They're not cheap price wise, but they're cheaply made. But people are buying them. Personally, I'd buy the Russian brands first. We have Ladas. They haven't gone up in price. They've been around for forever. They have some nice vehicles. The UAZ Patriot is kind of like the Russian version of the Jeep. And I can buy one of those for $15,000. Fully loaded, stick only. You can't get it with an automatic. They started making automatics, but they've been having trouble getting the parts for the automatic transmissions. So they're designing their own now.
So is the manufacturing for the parts and the auto industry in general there, the assembly and everything, is most of it from Russia, or do they rely on a lot of parts from China and other countries?
Well, they do rely on parts for many things from other countries, but Russia has taken the attitude that on things like cars that they manufacture, airplanes, that they're creating their own parts that they didn't used to supply before. The SU airliners, we have the SU fighter jets, but the Sukhoi company also makes jetliners, and they used to use European engines in them, Rolls-Royce engines. And when they couldn't get parts for them and they couldn't manufacture those, they stopped the airliner. They never released it. And it took them about a year, and now they've started developing it, and they've just released it with all Russian parts. ATM machines could not get foreign parts for ATM machines. So now Sberbank has released the first all Russian ATM machine, everything designed and developed in Russia.
Interesting. So, what about the electrification of the auto industry? That they're all in over here, pushing hard, retooling all of the factories, billions and billions and billions and upon billions of dollars in taxpayer money being invested into this, given to these multinational corporations to push ahead with this initiative. What's happening over in Russia? Are they as aggressive with that over there?
I'd say they're aggressive with it, but it's not like you hear about it every day. They just went ahead and did it. You can buy an electric Tesla here. We see them all over the place. So Tesla does sell here. The one that hit me just a couple of days ago is the Buhanka, which is the old green, looks like a loaf of bread van. They've just released an electric version. And we have charging stations all over the place. So there are electric cars here. The Chinese produce them. Even in Crimea, you don't see a lot of charging stations, but they're popping up all over the place now.
Are there government regulations or quotas in place? For instance, here, starting in about a year and a half or 2 years, they're going to start to cap the number of gasoline vehicles that manufacturers will be allowed to sell, which will create a shortage. And they're going to start to force people. And I think it's by 2035, you will only be able to buy new electric vehicles here in Canada. Are they doing similar things in Russia, or no?
No, not at all. They give the people the choice. Our gas is cheap. What you do see a lot of people doing here is they want to economize on gasoline. They'll put propane tanks on their cars. Electric vehicles are fairly popular in bigger cities like Moscow or St. Petersburg. They're becoming popular elsewhere, but it's just people do it because they want to do it.
So they are giving people the choice, and it seems like there's more more of a free market in Russia today than there is here. This is very, government. This is entirely government driven over here. It's centrally planned for sure. I would say the entire auto industry here has been essentially captured by government. It's now controlled, directed entirely by government. It's unprecedented, really, what's going on.
Yeah, no, not here.
Very interesting. Just coming back to this this war, what else do you call it? There are reports today where the U.S. is expressing concerns and sounding alarm bells because they're saying Russia is using missiles from North Korea. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have big thoughts on that. I saw that, and of course, the U.S. has called a Security Council meeting. Now, my first thought is what's the difference if Russia is getting missiles from South Korea? Right. Ukraine's getting them from the United States and Germany and so on and so on and so on. What's the difference?
Or actually North
Um,
Korea, but yeah. Um,
yeah. But realistically, Russia is at a full wartime, economy right now. They're producing this stuff themselves. Now, are they using any from Korea? Maybe. They were accused of using Iranian drones. They said they weren't. They got like a plane load or two of Ukrainian drones. They saw how the Ukrainians made them. They maybe got some parts from Ukraine, but they're now manufacturing those Iranian drones in Russia. So, it's all Russian produced again. So maybe they got some missiles from North Korea and, they have a longer range. They can carry more explosives. But as what they'll do is they will take those systems apart, see how they're made, and they will start producing them here. It's funny here in the US complaining about things because before this attack last night, we had a US Air Force RQ-4B Global Hawk patrolling off the coast of Crimea for 20 hours. That's a drone that actually looks for targets, listens to radio communications, and gives targeting information to the Ukrainians. During the attack, an American RC-135W rivet joint was used during the attack. And what a 135 rivet joint is, it's a dedicated electronic surveillance aircraft that, is employed to direct strategic and tactical missile missions. They soak up the electronic emissions from communications, radar systems, and so on. And are actually NATO F-16 fighter jets from Romania that helped carry out these missile strikes yesterday. Now, the Air Force chatter says that they were piloted by foreign pilots, but the Romanians are saying, no, 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 we trained Ukrainian fighters to fly these jets, and they just flew our US F-16s. Now, they must have also taught them to speak in Romanian, but, so as much as you're not hearing the things in the West and it's kind of gone on the back burner, the US is actively trying to help Ukraine do these strikes so that they can get the PR, take it back to Congress and say, see, we need to give them more money. See how well they're doing. We're doing most of the work, but see how well they're doing.
Yeah, the reports I'm seeing here, well, even in that article from Foreign Affairs, they're saying that the reason the counteroffensive didn't really work with Ukraine or for Ukraine is because the troops did not have enough time to adequately train, that they are running out of munitions, that they need more support from the West. That again, it doesn't sound good, and it sounds like there is sort of an ongoing race here to rearm, re-equip, reman what's going on. But I think I'll get your thoughts on this. Where is Ukraine at with this? Where is Russia at with this? Again, it looks like Russia absolutely has to have the upper hand there.
Russia has the upper hand. They are not going out and throwing people on the front line. They twice a year, and they've been doing this twice a year for years and years now. They call up 143,000 conscripts twice a year. Young men that are sent in for military training. They, are actually doing a lot of support work, and they're using the more experienced soldiers on the front lines, but they've got tens of thousands of volunteers a week going to the recruiting stations and saying, I want to go fight. I want to fight for my motherland. So, they don't have the same situation. Ukraine's throwing, more and more elderly people. They've raised the age limit. They're sending younger kids now, 15, 16 years old. They're sending, disabled people, guys who've been, critically wounded, healed. Maybe they've got a prosthetic leg or something, and they're sending them back out to fight. And now they're stopping women from leaving the country, and they're calling up women to go fight. They're trying to get the Western European countries to send their, Ukrainians back to the country to fight. And, most of them are going, well, yeah, they should go back, but it's not up to us to make them go back. So it just is not a good situation for Ukraine. I actually talked to a couple of my Ukrainian sources just yesterday and today, and I was told that the Ukrainian military has confirmed that they have a shortage of air defense missiles. Lieutenant General Sergei Naev said that there are only enough man pads for a few attacks by Russia. And the U.S. has promised them 1,000 Patriot missiles, but that's a cost of $3 to $8 billion to the United States, and it now has to be approved by Congress. And they use 2 to 3 missiles to destroy one target. So when you have Russia shooting 50 missiles at you, you're now burning up 100 of those Patriot missiles to 150 of those Patriot missiles. They just can't sustain this.
That's huge money, huge money. And the United States is spread thin around the world to begin with all of its military bases, and now facing really conflicts on two fronts. And if something happens with China and Taiwan, they would be on 3 fronts. That's spread extremely thin. How much of an impact do you think that kind of dynamic is likely to have on this conflict in Ukraine?
I think it's going to make all of those conflicts fail. I think the more the United States tries to spread itself, the worse it's going to be, not only for the countries that are fighting these battles, but for the United States. I think that's the only reason the United States is so involved in trying to get a PR win for Ukraine now, is because Biden thinks he can win by being a wartime presidential candidate. And, I think that's foolish to begin with. I don't think that's going to work well for him, considering a vast majority of people are tired of spending their tax dollars on other countries, multiple other countries, and them suffering. I mean, I think you're seeing the same thing in Canada. The more you send to other countries, the higher your prices go, the lower your standards of living go. Now, today, I was seeing reports that South Crimea is evacuating people from some of the islands that are closer to North Korea because North Korea has been firing artillery shells at them. So now are we going to have another one there? Because the United States is bound to go in and protect South Korea. So are they going to fight South Korea, Taiwan, Israel, Ukraine, Serbia? They've been trying to start a color revolution there. I know from friends in Armenia, they've got, U.S. assets running around there, stirring the pot up. How much can the United States do?
This, in my mind, as it continues to escalate from one front to another, to another, to another, it threatens the very existence of the United States. Just the economy alone, I can't see how the U.S. can possibly afford this, can possibly sustain this. There's a fraction of the manufacturing base in Canada and the US that there used to be. There just isn't the economy there anymore. You can't just print money out of thin air and expect to pay for everything either. That's only going to go so far. I'm not sure where this leaves us over here, I think that we're in peril.
Yeah, I think it's a big peril. And what's propping up the economy, at least in the United States, is the wartime machine. The more weapons they ramp up to produce, the more money these big military companies are taking in. They're kind of propping the economy up so they don't go into a recession. But what do you do with the millions of other people that
Right.
now get put out of work? You can
Ye-
say, well, gee, our GDP is up, but the numbers I saw just a couple of days ago is they're claiming their GDP is up like 6%, 5.6%, but it's actually up 2.9% according to all the guys who track this stuff out there, the international companies that do. And that's a 2.6% decrease from the previous year. So they're falsely propping it up as well.
Yeah, and
And
you
what,
can't eat missiles. A missile is not
yeah.
wheat. Um, and it doesn't do the people here any good if everything produced and the wealth from that is shipped overseas and then blown up. It might
Mm-hmm.
enrich some people beyond belief, but for the average person, it doesn't do them any good. I mean, it's okay if you're working on the assembly line producing military goods, I guess, but overall, it seems like it's a false or unsustainable economic model.
Yeah. And this march that they're going towards of let's confiscate more Russian assets
Mm.
and give it to Ukraine, is what I see happening there. Is if Europe and the United States decide that they're going to take another 300, 400 billion dollars of foreign assets of Russia, is what's going to happen is there's going to be even more countries that start saying, hey, BRICS, I want to join you and I want to start trading in my national currency because we can't trust the dollar. If we're holding dollars, they're going to take them away from us if we have a problem.
Yep. And, the US dollar is really propped up by oil. They're not drilling for oil in North America. The energy industry is really under attack by the government itself. We've become, reliant on imports of oil. But again, over in Russia, they're producing natural gas, they're producing
Mhm.
oil, they're producing energy. And that has to be one of the main reasons you're paying less for fuel, that your inflation rate is lower, that you have more economic stability. Thoughts?
Yeah. Well, Saudi Arabia isn't trading in the petrodollar anymore. You know, they're trading in national currencies with people now. Um, yeah, I think that's why things are good here. And, um, I talked to one of the Duma members, was June of June of 2023, I guess it was. And I have that interview on my site somewhere. But she was saying, empires always rise and fall. And her view was is that the American empire is in a decline and the Russian uh, empire is growing. So sanctions have caused Russians to focus on Russia. Tourism in Russia is up because they can't go to Europe. Uh, you know, Production is being done in Russia. Tourism, uh, you know, people are being given jobs here, and there's actually a shortage of labor now. They have a complete list. It's like 186 professions in Russia that if you work in one of these professions, they will let you come here on a work permit, work for a year, and give you citizenship
It's
because they need people.
it seems as well like there's been a real missed opportunity here, because you only have to think back just a few years ago, and Putin wanted to join the European Union and was rejected. It seems like there was a real opportunity to forge a much closer relationship and build on all of that and make it productive and constructive. And what do we have now instead? We have war.
Yeah, I saw a picture today that was in a TASS magazine from, uh, it was probably 30, 40 years ago. And they had the British, American, and Soviet flag flying together. And the caption was, I'll paraphrase it because I don't have it in front of me, but something about friends working together for the betterment of the world. What happened?
I don't know. It seems like maybe greed and the worst parts of the worst traits of humanity and people kind of bubbling to the surface when I look at what's going on right now with the the release of these Jeffrey Epstein documents, and all of the people, all these Western leaders who are being named, these names coming out. It's just the worst side of people, the worst
Yeah.
parts of society. It's absolute corruption. It's a grotesque display of greed and immorality. Uh, it's forgive me, but it seems like a bunch of pigs feeding at the public trough and laughing while they do it. That's what it's like to me.
Yeah. And this is where Russia has a much more conservative attitude towards things. They had I don't know, some famous person here had a naked party, they're calling it. It wasn't really a bunch of naked people, but almost. But they determined it was lewd and lascivious. So they've arrested the woman who had this party, filed charges against her. All the politicians that were there, the um, actors, whatever, whoever was participating, they're filing charges against them. And it's like, we don't approve of this. We aren't going to allow you to do it. And this is kind of the thing I'm seeing why Westerners are wanting to come to this country.
Yeah, it's a speech I recall of Putin standing there saying that he doesn't want, and nobody really wants to get into the private lives of people, but he says that marriage should be between a man and a woman. He's very conservative in those kinds of things, and the way he views those things.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, just look at what the West is doing to itself with the decadence, with the immorality. Uh,
Yeah. Homosexuality.
yeah.
The thing I heard in the United States when I lived there for a long time was, Russia has made it illegal to be a homosexual or a lesbian. Reality is they haven't. They've made it illegal for you to adopt a child if you're homosexual. They've made it illegal for you to marry if you're homosexual. And if you leave the country and get married in another country that allows it, and you come back here, they will not recognize you as a married couple. So you don't get any of the benefits of it. Now, if you want to do whatever you want to do in your own home, they don't care. But they don't want to see you bringing it out on the street. They don't want it being shown to children or encouraging it. They recently outlawed sex change operations here. So, reality is the city next to us here, Simmies, used to be the homosexual capital of Crimea under Ukraine. Now, they still have a gay bar there, and even straight people go there. And they expect that's what they're going to see in the bar, and they're left alone. As long as they don't come outside of the bar kissing and, groping and, doing things like that, leave the bar, go home, do whatever you want to do. We don't care. This is kind of Russia's attitude.
Yeah. So here we have people protesting and fighting in the streets because of drag queen story time being held in libraries and in schools. It seems very disruptive over here, and that seems to also be, part of what is, I don't know, it's related almost in my mind to the conflicts that we're seeing around the world. It's economic, it's also cultural. These wars are partly about religion, maybe not quite so much in the conflict in Ukraine, but certainly in the Middle East. And then you have all this immigration happening here. It's changing the demographics here. We are really in a place of instability here in the West for sure. I mean, I'm just throwing that out there. That's not really a question, I guess. That's just me babbling on and making an observation based on what you've
Yeah.
just said. But do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, even if you look at the Middle East, is it really about religion? It's about religion with one country that wants to take land from everybody. But all the Muslims, all these guys practicing Islam, you start looking at guys out of Indonesia and that whole area of Asia down in there. They fully support Palestinians. The entire Arab world has come together. They've linked arms. But the amazing thing is they're against what Israel is doing, yet they live side by side with Orthodox Russians, Catholic Russians. You even in a country the size of Russia, where you have Buddhists and Muslims and Christians and atheists, they all just live together. You don't have the same issues. So why is it? Is it because all of these countries are against these liberal ideas, or what is it? Why can people here live together and people in the West can't live with other people in the world?
I don't have an answer. I don't
I
understand
don't either.
Don't know.
I'm doing like you are. I'm kind of babbling.
Yeah. Well, Kevin, is there anything else you'd like to draw our attention to today, or is there anything we might be missing with regard to this conflict in Ukraine? I really am so grateful for what you've been doing there with your work.
No, I don't think so. I think we've pretty much covered it. We're just seeing, Ukraine take a little different tact than they normally have. And, the idea is that, we'll probably see some more strikes here in the next few days. If we do, I'll let you know. Quite
Yeah.
honestly, I'd like them to, end the whole thing and let me get back to doing regular information warfare stuff and looking at some of the other conflicts going on.
Yeah. And just finally, your thoughts on how long this thing is likely to go on. I guess still no real end in sight.
Yeah, I'll be like the rest of the analysts out there. I'll throw a date out there. Sometime between spring and 2026.
Okay. All right. I think that's
Best I can
probably
do. Yeah.
that's probably a pretty fair assessment. Kevin
Yeah.
Michelizzi, thank you so much, sir, for your time today. Greatly appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on again, Rick. Good talking with you.
Oh, one last thing. Tell people again how they can find your work online. That's important.
I used to use my Infowars.press site down here, but I'm putting everything under American Crimea site now. You can find my information warfare stuff and everything by going to that website.
Excellent. Okay. Kevin Michelizzi, thank you.
Thank you.